Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we have a quorum, but some people are still rolling in. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Celia Risha, Senior Vice President of Programs at the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber and the Women's Network, we hope you are joining us today feeling as safe and healthy as possible. As we continue to adapt to this time, the Women's Network remains committed to connecting women across all industries and career levels to strengthen your professional networks and to engage you in the Greater Boston business community. I'd like to take a moment and welcome anyone who's joining today for the first time. I encourage you to join us in the discussion on social media using the hashtag BossBizWomen and tagging the handle Boston Chamber. Please also remember to enter your questions for our panelists in the chat feature. We'll get to that during the Q&A portion. Please note that we are recording today's webinar and we will be streaming it live on Facebook as well. Now on to today's program, which features women who are leaders in artificial intelligence in the field, all in their own ways. AI has already changed the way we work and live, and there's no signs of that slowing down. So with that, we'll jump right to it. I'd like to give a big thank you to our Women's Network sponsor, Liberty Mutual Insurance. We appreciate their support and partnership on this content and platform to bring it to you today and all in the coming months. So now I'd like to welcome Rose Liu, Senior Director, Data Science at Liberty Mutual, to introduce our speakers and our moderator. So with that, Rose, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Celia. It's my pleasure to be here. At Liberty Mutual, we're definitely committed to the advancement of women in our organization, and we show that commitment in our expanded parental leave and flex time policies, our support for We at Liberty, our Women and Male Allies Employee Resource Group, and our Men as Allies initiative, which recognizes the role men play in women's advancement. Having been in the advanced and predictive analytics space myself in the past 7 years, I've definitely witnessed the tremendous leaps and bounds the field of AI has made, and it is a definite strategic top priority for Liberty Mutual, and I'm very excited to hear more about others' journey in this space. And now it is my honor to introduce today's moderator and panelists. Our first panelist is my colleague Deeksha Joshi, Director and Vice President in GRS Transformation at Liberty Mutual. In her role, Deeksha helps Liberty Mutual understand the strategic and operational shifts induced by disruptive trends like AI, sharing economy, autonomous vehicles, etc., while assisting in building operational excellence. She holds over 15 years of experience helping organizations with business challenges in various roles like technology commercialization, entrepreneurship, and management consulting. Thank you for joining us, Deeksha. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Rudina Seseri, founder and managing partner of Glasswing Ventures. Rudina leads the firm's investments in artificial intelligence-enabled enterprise software as a service, cloud, information technology software, and vertical markets. She holds 17 years of investing and operational experience in high growth companies and industries ranging from IT software, cloud, and enterprise SaaS. In addition, Rudina has led several investments and board of director roles at Chaos Search, Cloud Truth, Xylotech, and Social Flow, to name a few. Welcome, Rudina. I'd also like to welcome Julie Johnson-Roberts, the CEO and co-founder of Armored Things. Armored Things is an early-stage crowd intelligence company which uses AI to transform physical security and operations for large venues and campuses. The organization's mission is to keep people safe where they work, live, and play. This crystallized early in the company's life after events like the Las Vegas shooting revealed the critical need to bring data and AI into the world of physical security to get better insights faster to key decision makers. In addition to Julie's impressive background, last year she was recognized as one. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome our moderator, Roopa Navin, Associate Partner Financial Services, Cognitive Process Transformation for IBM. Roopa has years of global experience in the IT services and insurance industry. Prior to IBM, Roopa was with Cognizant Technology Solutions in their insurance practice for 7 years and has worked in the marketing, account management, and delivery organizations. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll now turn it over to Roopa to start the conversation.
Roopa, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Fantastic. First of all, I'd like to say that it's an absolute pleasure to be participating in this panel, being a moderator. I thank the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce for having me here on behalf of IBM. I also would like to thank all the participants who have joined us today. I'm sure what you will get to hear today will be very well worth your time. So without much further ado, let me get started with the questions for the panelists here. I had a chance to meet with you all, Julia, Rudina, and Deeksha earlier, and I'm glad that we're chatting today. Let me have, the first question for all the three of you, and jump in, any of you can jump in first. The first question is, what's the current AI landscape in the greater Boston area? And how do you think that female professionals in particular are, working in this space? Julie, would you like to go before?
Sure. So Boston, I think, has always had an advantage for finding great talent. So I will talk about this question from the perspective of building an organization and recruiting talent. Currently, I think at least 4 Boston educational institutions have AI-specific programs. I think MIT, UMass, BU, Harvard all have tracks, master's tracks related to AI. I think that's the first step, right? Founders will stay after those programs. They'll start to build teams. That talent pool will grow. It becomes a very virtuous cycle. What I love most about the educational opportunities here is that it becomes a great tool for recruiting out of institutions to help level the playing field. I think all of us have a tendency to reach into our existing networks, and when you're reaching out to educational communities, they tend to have much better diversity in their populations than we might have in our immediate networks. So it does, I think, help open the conversation to more women and underrepresented minorities as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. What is your take on that, Rudina?
So good afternoon. I would agree with Julie. I think I look at the world of emerging technologies and AI from an investment perspective. So what are opportunities and startups that get formed that can leverage AI and frontier tech to disrupt in a positive manner and create value for, as a next generation leader. From that perspective, I think the reality is that Boston and the broader sort of East Coast community has deep DNA in enterprise cybersecurity. Some of the perhaps less sexy than consumer, but highly resilient types of businesses. And so from that perspective, it has always been a great market to invest in. Overlay on top of that, the fact that there is a strong history of strong academics, whether you come at it from the data angle or whether you come at it from the computer science angle, as we see the two fields somewhat intermingling as more and more developers are incorporating ML techniques or vice versa. I think that also helps. It's the reality, however, that as you look at the founder landscape, you will see a lot more data and AI talent that is male, whether that's because we still, only 10% of computer science majors are women, whether it is the fact that it's still an emerging field and a lot of people who were adjacent to ML and AI now are sort of refocusing themselves, or whether it's the historical legacy that hard tech was typically dominated by males. So while my firm does not have a women mandate per se, we absolutely look at that and look at the statistics, because there are all sorts of consequences around the teams that get formed that we are backing, and all the way to the biases in the products that are being built, if they're being built by homogeneous teams and trained on largely homogeneous data sets. So from that perspective, I'm quite optimistic in terms of the market and the opportunities we're going after in AI. I think we have a lot more headway to make around incorporating women. And this coming from the point of view of a firm where if the industry average of backing women CEOs and executives is around 17% for venture. In my firm, that number looks more like 40%. And if the industry average of 35% of boards are women and minorities, in my firm, that number is 80%. So while we're orders of, several fold higher than the industry, I still think that my overall sense is that women and minorities are underrepresented.
Okay, I mean, that's a fantastic perspective, Rudina. Deeksha, over to you. I mean, I know that Liberty Mutual has a lot of women in tech, So what do you see in the greater Boston area, specifically in the insurance industry? Maybe not just in the Boston area, but in the East Coast region?
Absolutely. I would like to say that Rudina and Julie had really good perspective that Boston leads the world as an AI capital, and our community, our schools, our researchers are giving us the first mover advantage, and we have great talent pool. I like the ecosystem, but I'm generally worried about the ability to hold some of the best technology talent coming out of our schools to stay and contribute to Boston's local companies. We lose a lot of that talent that's coming out of the schools to other cities. And we hope we could do more to attract local talent. Liberty has a very strong DNI presence, and we have a mandate wherein we are trying to attract women in technology, and there's lots of stuff that's happening around the organization and the leadership to support that, but I'm sure we can do a lot more.
Okay. So, just kind of underlaying that question, Deeksha, right? Do you agree that most business have yet to feel the effect of AI and really working to determine how they can most effectively deploy the technology? I mean, what do you see? I'm sure you would be seeing that in Liberty, but as such, within the industry, what do you see?
I do see businesses are juggling a delicate balance between their core competency, their culture and data and insights. And in the last 5 years, we've seen huge transformations in many businesses as capabilities have grown tremendously. And many businesses I see are going through their S curves of disruption and growth. So when technology that businesses rely on are going through transformation, AI becomes the second battle. So while AI provides a great opportunity for businesses, I believe many business structures are not prepared to respond to the AI adoption. We, as business leaders, need to make sure we have the stable vision when it comes to technology and a clear path to advanced analytics and technology roadmaps.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Deeksha. Julie, going back to you, today, the representation of AI by women, I think it's about 22%. Do you think that women are missing out on the opportunities the field really presents? And is the field missing out on the skill sets of women? Julie, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, but I think that also extends way beyond AI to a lot of technology, to Rudina's point in general. The way that I think we've all talked about bias in AI, and there have been a lot of publications about bias in AI, and there's obvious need for a diverse population writing algorithms to make sure that that doesn't perpetuate human bias over time. Right. The way I think about women being part of the AI story for our company is a little bit different. We're using AI to predict patterns of people and flow, originally for security in large venues and large campuses, but now also to detect things like overcrowding, areas that have been highly utilized so that we can help prioritize sanitation. When I think about the role of humans in this equation, software is part of it. Software can help filter through tons and tons of data coming out of lots of disparate systems. But at the end of the day, most individuals still want some sort of human in the loop, making sure that we're not missing things that a human might recognize that a machine might not, because this, again, is an unusual situation. This might not be the scenario that we've trained our software to look for when we're looking for anomalies. So I do think that there's a role for human operators, and my hope is that a diverse set of human operators is also going to spot things differently.
Okay. What is your view on that, Rudina?
My unmute didn't want to come on. So I think I addressed that and in my earlier comment around the fact that, we need more diversity and we need different approaches in tech and AI broadly in frontier tech. And honestly, it's less about just sort of gender equality. It's less of a normative issue. It's, it's as much a normative issue as it is a good business issue, where in a world of startups where you're trying to drive new technology adoption, you want different kinds of thinking, you want different kinds of approaches. So I think that has to do as much with how do you get the best outcomes as it has to do with right and wrong. I'd also add that in my humble opinion, I think data and what we have in terms of data sets with biases or not, with information on different segments of society or not, is going to be the new divide. If we thought about wage parity and have done so for decades, I think data parity or equal richness of data for different groups is going to be mission critical as as society continues to advance. And then perhaps speaking on something that Deeksha was saying earlier, AI sort of sometimes not being well understood or being put as a secondary area in terms of the priorities of large enterprises. It's interesting because 100% of our portfolio companies are, either enabling the AI enterprise or have, core AI in their product. And yet none of them, and I repeat, none of them lead with, we are an AI company. They lead with, we are solving a real problem. And I mentioned that merely to emphasize the point that if you lead with AI or the next sexy next gen technology, you will get a lot of calls. I call them false indicators of interest. You'll get a lot of calls with prospective, what you think are prospective customers, but turn out to be interested students who want to learn off of you and may or may not have any need or intention to buy. So I think the key around AI adoption is around talking about the problem you're solving, where the how you get into the AI. And every business, small or big, is going through digital transformation. At the core, digital transformation has to do with data as much as being an impetus for driving sort of better efficiency and execution. If you're talking about data, overlay the algorithms and you have an AI paradigm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rudina, I mean, just to pivot a little bit, and given that your organization invests in AI-powered firms across the board, I wanted to know that under the current pandemic, we are really seeing frontline workers, especially in the medical field, really struggling to protect themselves as well as serving the patients. Are are you aware of something or the AI advancements in the medical field, and way that these organizations can really use technologies to help serve these frontline workers and service the patients better?
So from a core domain expertise point of view, healthcare is not the area that I focus or we focus on. In fact, sort of we stop right at the edge. So I do not have a direct answer to that end. If we broaden the question to say what is the role that AI and data can play in addressing or at least helping mitigate part of the pandemic, I think it will come in multiple forms. I think you can see the opportunity around the potentially, defining them as the patient side, around the disruption that we're seeing on the web, and how, taking control of privacy and taking control of your own data ownership rather than it residing with the enterprises or apps that are serving the consumers, that will give you the opportunity to basically take control of your data, take ownership of your data. So as we move forward in this sort of new environment where tracing becomes critical, where tracking becomes critical, the ability for a patient to have their data stored, and I'm thinking of Solid in a portfolio company, Inrupt in this example, that carries their data, their healthcare data wherever they go. So if they walk into a hospital and they have COVID-19 symptoms, and they have immediate access, opt-in access that they can give to the medical professionals, well, all of a sudden a lot of confusion, a lot of the past history and discovering that whether you have pre-existing conditions or not can be eliminated. So I think that's a huge opportunity around AI and data. MIT has a gigantic effort underway around the various facets of diagnosis, tracing, tracking, etc., that leverages a lot of AI tools, but also other frontier tech like blockchain that's under works. And perhaps I'll flip it over to Julie, because she can talk to you about the physical side of this and what it means from a cyber or from a physical security perspective, and how you leverage AI in a COVID world.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Like Rudina mentioned, Julie, I mean, your organization has the crowd intelligence platform, essentially providing a heat map of, how people move around, real time, as well as based on behavior patterns, and predicting their movements too. So given the capability that your organization has in that space, could you talk a little bit about that? How your organization helps companies real time in this situation of the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I think it's actually more critical than ever before to understand how your space is being used. I'm sure many folks who are listening to this chat have actually read the White House guidelines about reopening. And if you look at guidelines for employers or for large public spaces, some of the talking points include an ability to know where your high capacity areas are, focus on sanitation, think about body temperatures as a preventative gateway measure before people enter, have some sort of policy in place for contact tracing, whether that's manual or automated. These are just some of the recommendations. We actually address a number of them directly and indirectly, and then understanding risk to the enterprise requires an understanding of all of them, right? So while we might not do body temperature scanning, that doesn't mean that that's not a great piece of a holistic enterprise strategy, but there's no silver bullet. So we look at ourselves as more on the risk mitigation side of the spectrum. If you're thinking about your ability to maintain a safe workplace, we're going to be there helping you figure out what to clean, helping make sure that you're not over capacity, providing you ability to audit that, go back in time and see if your general population was following the guidelines that you put into place for their protection. On the other side of the spectrum, you have some of the more reactive measures like contact tracing, where once someone has tested positive, you want to make sure that you can notify and inform in a HIPAA compliant type way. Again, that's not our solution, but all of these things flow together into a holistic strategy where you don't want to just deploy one thing because you might be missing a piece of the puzzle. I think, as we've adapted our technology towards the new COVID-related narrative, my question as it pertains to AI is how much further out can we predict the surges in human behavior, or that we have a group of people coming towards our space? Do we have a better ability to tell them, hey, let's not, go to this floor today because this floor is already at 60% of safe capacity. Let's go to a different floor. I think we as individuals like seeing or understanding that type of data to make better decisions and feel empowered to make better decisions. And today there's not a whole lot of data that's going to the end user or end individual going into these environments.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for that. You were recently featured in Boston Globe, where you discussed learning that in times of crisis, a decisive leader is needed. So as a CEO of a young startup in a fast-paced industry, what else has stood out as important lessons for really leading your team and servicing customers?
Sure. And I think, a little more context on the decisive leadership piece. Many startups build teams around individual autonomy, right? We like to empower smart individuals to help us build successful companies. In a crisis, that doesn't always work. So in particular, in that article, I was talking about the decision to go work from home. And if you allow every individual to make their own decision, all of a sudden there's a lot of confusion, or there's no norm across the organization of whether or not it's acceptable. And that's where the decisive action needs to come down, be clearly communicated and understood by everyone. As I look at other learnings throughout this crisis, one of my big takeaways is that things that were previously mandatory no longer feel like they'll be mandatory when we return, go back to a more normal setup. So for example, a lot of companies still were 100% in-person development. Increasingly, we're seeing that different types of teams function quite well remotely. And we've probably accelerated the pace of adoption of certain digital first technologies by 5 to 10 years. If my 70-year-old parents can do Zoom calls, anyone can do Zoom calls. I'm highly convinced. Not that they're not tech people. I'm going to get in trouble for that one if my mother watches this on Facebook. But yeah, as we think about travel, how many times we need to go see customers to close a deal, these norms I think will change. And that's been a big takeaway for me.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. So on remote working, really, Rudina, you've spoken about pervasive connectivity in the past. Would you explain what you mean by that and how AI really plays a role in enabling this and really protecting us as we shift to a more remote way of work and, essentially interacting in business?
So the notion of pervasive connectivity has to do with the fact that pretty much any device we or form factor we interact with today has connectivity, has sensors, has Wi-Fi, has Bluetooth, has some point of connectivity. And oftentimes, in fact, the term smart devices, I would put the smart in quotation marks because it's really less about the smartness, more about the connectivity of the device. So when that occurs, what it means is that from whether it's your connected TV, whether it is your Apple Watch and everything in between, even in steady state, when you are not actively engaging in an activity, we're generating data. So the underlying view behind pervasive connectivity is the belief that it's been connectivity that's sort of opened the floodgates around the explosion of data. And that in fact, we're still probably in the first or second inning when it comes to data explosion, that we are going to see more and more data, not only in quantity, which is sort of what I'm referring to by pervasive connectivity, but in the diversity and veracity and, and the different types of data sets. The reason that has been important and honestly critical to the adoption of AI is because fundamentally you could have had, whether it started with deep learning or not, you could have had all the algorithms in the world, but minus the fuel, minus the data and this richness of data, the reality of AI, at least narrow AI or applied AI as we see it in the present today, would not have materialized. It is also the case that there is a third part to that equation. So pervasive connectivity leading to data, you have the algorithms, you also have the compute power, right? Moore's law still holding, where you can perform computations today at a fraction of the cost than you could even 24 months ago. So from that perspective, we haven't hit the ceiling, and it's a trifecta of those three drivers that makes AI adoption in service of a solution a reality today.
Thank you, Rudina, for that. Deeksha, to you, right, and really talking about using data, right? So to essentially inform strategic decisions ahead of the curve, organizations use data immensely. Would you highlight one example of a data-informed decision related to AI that has led to a shift really in, the core functioning of your organization, be it cost saving or anything else?
Definitely. So I'll talk about how AI can transform various parts of our insurance value chain, generally leading to efficiency, cost savings, better customer experience. Um, I, I can talk about specific or general examples that the insurance industry has been using for some time now. So for example, AI can be leveraged in pricing, distribution, claims, employee experience across our value chain. Additionally, the various domains of AI that can be leveraged, computer vision, natural language programming, are few important ones that have really taken off in some of these use cases that I can talk about. One of the examples could be leveraging aerial imagery for buildings and computer vision that can help improve pricing. It can help support the claims process. It can help reduce losses through fraud. And one of the promise that we have for our customers is we promise protection for the unexpected, which means when we are trying to fulfill that promise at the time of a natural catastrophe, like a hurricane or a tornado, in a quick way, wherein we can provide the care and relief to our customers, it's a hard business problem to solve. And technology and AI at that point in time can help us determine the extent of damage and provide support to our customers quickly. It's a win-win for all sides. It can expedite things, it can also reduce cost. Additionally, as we think of applying the same technology in terms of times of COVID, when we are all trying to practice social distancing in these unnatural times, leveraging AI-led technology can again help us estimate the losses and pay claims, which is the business we are in. And it's really important. Similarly, we think of use cases for natural language processing in our business. And there is a wealth of information that we have in complex documents. And we can automate tedious tasks in our manual operations. We can make quick decisions leveraging that data around coverages. So all of those examples wherein AI is being leveraged in the value chain of insurance currently.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Deeksha. I mean, even IBM works with multiple insurance companies, and you just listed out some examples in PNC. We are seeing even in the life insurance segment. I mean, by really using AI, and given the situation with COVID that we have today, it becomes very important for life insurance companies to be able to rate their risk accurately. And with customers not being able to go for medical examination, fluidless underwriting is going to become the norm, and AI really plays a very big role in that. Deeksha, you worked in this space as an internal and external consultant for multiple firms. So really, I wanted to understand, for those interested in learning more about disruptive technology and AI, how does the work and the career path differ between these two positions?
It's a good question. And I would say from my vantage point, if I look at the work, the process, the skill sets needed for both external and internal consulting, it's very similar. When it specifically talk about AI and technology, I would say AI is a field that is evolving and it's still in its infancy. So there's a lot of learning on both sides, whether you are internal consultant or external consultant, that needs to happen all the time. The career path for AI and disruptive technologies, I would say, is a lattice. It is not a ladder. It's not wherein you just keep moving up the ladder. It's lattice because you're learning different technologies and you're trying to apply them in different fields, in different ways possible. And as I think about other differences, I think the big difference between external and internal consultant is, as an external consultant, you have a breadth of exposure, which is cross-industry, which is cross-organizations, which is cross-vendors, and you might be working for a retail organization on one day and leveraging AI in that organization and then trying to work on a financial services organization on a second day in the same week, and you have a peer group who can share all of those learnings with you. So I think it's the breadth of exposure that you get. Whereas being an internal consultant, it's the depth of subject matter experience, which is much more in the same industry, which has different advantages. And then the third thing I would like to add here is the insights and knowledge that you have of an organization. So being an external consultant, you have limited knowledge of the organization, its culture, and whereas when you are internal, you have a lot of that nuance that you're aware of, and you can suggest the best opportunities or best things that can suit a company. And as we all know, change management, people aspects are so important to get anything done. And being part of an organization gives you a much higher ability to influence and execute.
Great. Thank you, Deeksha. So if I may ask, is there any particular role, be it an internal or an external consultant, which one did you enjoy more?
Both of them have their own pros and cons. Generally speaking, I would say I really enjoyed being an external consultant initially in my career because it gives you that breadth of experience, it gives you those connections, it gives you a broad understanding, and it gives you the choice to say which industry or which company you would want to work with. And then later in the career, I feel like being part of a company and being able to execute and learn the other side of the culture and other pieces which can make things possible, which can make things happen, feels really good to be able to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deeksha. That's very helpful. I'm just going to pivot to Rudina here. Rudina, given that your organization invests in AI, in firms leveraging AI and focusing on AI, how do you think Boston fares in funding opportunities and firms seeking really to invest in AI compared to the other US cities?
So it's an interesting question. I would say the Boston market and funding market has had its ups and downs, in that there have been periods. I mean, venture capital in many ways started in Boston, going back decades ago, and then of course it is an unquestionable fact that the epicenter for tech, in particular venture funding, and dollar concentration, is in Silicon Valley in the West Coast. Having said that, we have seen overall a resurgence of venture capital firms in Boston and venture capital funding that follows. Glasswing is fairly well established in sort of as a firm that invests in frontier tech and AI companies, but I'd caution us as making AI investing as a sort of standalone category, because AI is a layer that cuts across, in every facet of the tech stack and cuts across all industries. So from that perspective, I would much rather say, look, Boston has a very strong sort of record of funding and successes around cybersecurity, core enterprise, or B2B software, some in consumer, although generally less so, life sciences and other areas. And in the current tech transformation, in the current tech disruption, AI is playing a very, very important role in that and in driving that momentum. So I would say, to answer your question head on, there's always more opportunity for more funding. But even compared to 5 years ago, I think the number of firms and funds that have been stood up to invest in what is a pretty well-developed entrepreneurial ecosystem in Boston is quite good.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Rudina. Just a quick time check. I think we're up for the Q&A from the audience. The questions that you have, I'll pose it back to the panelists. Maybe we'll just give me a few seconds. I'll try to access those questions.
Roopa, while you do that, I have a follow-up thought on the question you just asked, Rudina. which is, Rudina, I think from our experience as a startup, we've seen that Boston venture investors tend to focus on responsible growth. And I wonder if perhaps the current crisis could end up being an advantage to Boston investors as they look to invest in the next group of companies, focusing on companies who are in a good position to weather the storm, who are exercising great discipline versus what has felt a little bit like a growth at all costs mindset on the West Coast in recent years.
I would echo and reinforce the sentiment. I think I'd call it disciplined. We tend to have a more disciplined investor base, which in times when the markets are booming and, funding and term sheets are being issued based on, napkin drawings, it generally doesn't put this market in a favorable light, because if you are a founder, you want the highest valuation. Now, I will tell you, and I think at some point Julie will attest, that as a startup executive and CEO, that funding, high valuations can cut both ways. It's amazing if it's only always up and to the right, but you have a very high valuation. Do you really want to go from one level to the next and keep going higher on your valuation, or do you want to go very high and then have to take a write down in a next round? So just something to be said about that. But also when you speak about the current environment, companies that have been disciplined both on the execution side, but also the valuations that they've been funded at that are much more realistic. I think as we get into the next phase and as liquidity starts to re-enter the market, I think they will command premiums. They will command premiums because they have been grounded all along in their execution. I think that will be a very, very different sort of mindset and shift required in the West Coast in terms of what happens. They may still see the high valuations, not to get too technical, but they're going to see, ratchets and other terms where if you don't hit X, your valuations changes to Y, something that would have been an abomination to even bring up as recently as, a month or two ago.
Great, thanks so much, Rudina. I was just jotting down the questions from the panel. And so the first question that really was interesting is from Jeff. And he basically asks, is there an opportunity to leverage social distancing impact of the pandemic to really bring AI to the forefront? And really entice more women to come into this field. Rudina, do you want to respond to that?
I mean, look, I think there's an opportunity to incent women to be more entrepreneurial, perhaps. So this field is very broad, but and I going back to something that Julie had said earlier, where you're working remotely, where the 9 to 5 or FaceTime becomes less relevant, and productivity continues to be more relevant, and where working from home or some other location other than your place of work is an acceptable norm. I think it will open a lot of opportunities for women and mothers. I mean, I always say labor economists study women, not men. No offense to the men in the audience. Not for any other reason other than men kind of start work and retire. There may be movements in unemployment, but women are the ones that go and come and go and come, and some never re-enter. We might see, it would be fascinating to me to hear the perspective of labor economists to that effect. I also think that the gig economy, which was already here, will take a different shape. Could you be we've seen some startups where consulting for highly skilled labor has emerged, sort of akin to the gig economy in lower skilled labor. Could that, combined with remote working, open new opportunities? I think TBD, I don't have a clear point of view, but certainly I think it's going to be more embracing of different approaches of work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Julie, Rudina. Julie, you have a view on that?
I think the perspective from where I'm sitting is, how do we use the fact that we are trying to help to attract a more diverse candidate pool over time? We've found that our mission in general has been a big recruiting factor for us, that we really care about keeping people safe, and we were founded around that mission. I think that resonates with some people more than others. Can that open up a more diverse population? Maybe.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I have the next question from April, and she says, and basically she's asking the question that what happens to companies where they don't really use AI in-house, and how do they get started really? I think I will ask this question to Deeksha first. I mean, given that Liberty Mutual uses AI in-house a lot, but there would have been a starting point maybe very many years ago. So based on your experience, Deeksha, not just in Liberty, but as an external consultant prior to that, how do organizations really get started when they want to start using AI?
So the core for AI is data. As we know that it's the fuel that really expedites the artificial intelligence. And if I think of places to start or kick off AI adoption, I would also think about research and partnerships. So if an organization doesn't have all of their core data or are looking for support to get started, I feel like setting up partnerships and setting up research projects to try and do some of that would give them a kickstart. And then in addition to that, having a very methodical approach around technology and the vision to say, how do we make sure what data points we need and how do we make sure we get those data points over time? So you might not have thought about all of those things when you started the business and you're working on things, but then trying to have that roadmap over time to start capturing data. The third thing would also be the third-party data providers. So if you do not have a lot of your own data, today there is this huge opportunity and possibility to start capturing data from other providers who might be capturing data from outside and other sources, to be able to leverage that data with your own data to create solutions and products that gives you a bigger AI advantage.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Deeksha. Julie, I mean, your organization helps, companies, campuses to really use AI data to boost their security. Now, there would be a lot of, I'm sure you would have had customers who have never used this technology capability. But at the same time, they want to understand from you. So how did you go about, convincing them about what AI can do to their operations, and what is really the value that they can get so that they can quickly jump on to that bandwagon and use AI, maybe not directly, but indirectly through your organization?
Yeah, great. So I think going back to Rudina's comment about pervasive connectivity, these universities, these venues, these corporations have started to put those connectivity pieces into place, whether that's smart devices or even just the infrastructure that's becoming increasingly connected, like Wi-Fi and cameras. We leverage those investments. So when we go talk to them, we're starting with, hey, why don't we take additional advantage of the spend that you've already incurred and see if we can get additional value out of it. So where we fit in that landscape is taking all that data and then effectively using AI to sort and prioritize it into something actionable and meaningful. Once you know where your hotspots or bottlenecks or high capacity zones are, that's going to drive your actions coming out the other side, right? So it is an advantage that people have made significant investments in that infrastructure over the last 5, 10, 15 years. The flip side of those conversations is, wait a second, you're tapping into my existing infrastructure. What about privacy? What are we doing about that? And I think our advantage there, and every company views this issue differently, is that we're really taking a privacy-centric approach. We don't necessarily look to say, is it Roopa walking around the campus or in this elevator or in the cafeteria? We're saying there's a group that's forming that's greater than a certain size. We might want to pay attention to that. That's an anomaly based on what we know about this space. I don't need to know who you are in order to put in good practices to keep you safe.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, that's great, Julie. I mean, in IBM, I think coming to this privacy issue, this is a big concern for our customers. Like, for instance, if you take insurance companies, maybe a life insurer, wanting to improve their underwriting, some of the capabilities that we bring to the table is how we can use NLU visualization capability, really give a holistic picture of their end customer. But then there's always this concern for the insurance companies that how do we do that at the same time, manage their privacy. So I think it's going to be always a long drawn conversation with the customers and the consumers, but something that's good to have. Rudina, in terms of supporting organizations which are in the forefront of AI, what are the key factors that really play into you and your organization decide to invest in those companies? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I think for any venture capital firm, the number one sort of driver is, first of all, you have a certain strategy. For us, it's early stage venture, so it's typically a couple of founders, an idea, some code, a semi-built team, but not really, and they're probably somewhere between 2 to 4 quarters away from going to market, just to give you a sense of how early stage we are. When you look at a team like that, yes, you say, is it within my strategy? Like, for example, you'd asked me earlier about healthcare or life sciences. It could be a brilliant business, just not what I invest in and where I can add value. So probably not a fit. But you look at, if it's within the realm of enterprise, platform, cybersecurity, the first thing you do for any opportunity is actually look at the team and execution. Automation and all the other trends be damned. It's people who make or break you still, because it comes down to human execution. So I love great ideas. I love execution more, and would love the combination even better. So I'd say you start with that. And then where the domain experience comes in, and perhaps this is where you were heading, around the AI piece. What's investing in an AI startup is quite different in many regards than in your run-of-the-mill, software startup. Yes, they're in the cloud. Yes, they're SaaS. Yes, in my case, they're B2B, much like your atypical B2B software company. But there are certain characteristics that I think both Julie and Deeksha, probably from different perspectives, I hope will attest to. One being that the team DNA is different. You don't just have the technical founder or founders and the business founders. Within the technical, you have either embedded or probably a separate leg to this tool. That's your data science talent. And oftentimes the data science talents, at least historically in the recent past, has come out of academia. So immediately you have two tensions. One, where does the power lie? Typically the technical founder is the heart, of the company, is the cult, I call it, and the CEO, the business founder, is the brains, and both are needed. But now you have this data science person or team in the equation. How does that fit in? So it's both a roadmap consideration, it's also a cultural consideration. Furthermore, if you look at the DNA, ML data science type people are looking for perfection. Just getting it right? Two things, getting it right, or if you're coming out of a lab, it can be done in 3 months when it actually takes 3 years. So there is this, different mindset. If you are in production or if you are in a startup where you live, your longest lifespan is 18 months, because it's how much runway you've raised with your most recent round, you're looking for minimum viable. So how do you manage those tensions? I think you always have that tension, but it's become more emphasized in this AI world. I would say, so that's one bucket. The other two perhaps are data science is still as much an art as it is a science. So how do you manage, manipulate in a good way, but how do you deal with the data? How do you deal with the biases, etc.? And in fact, it leads to the third bucket of consideration, which is, in general, setup efforts and costs for a AI startup are higher than your run-of-the-mill software startup. You've got to either acquire the data, train the algorithms. There is more effort. And there's more effort also, you know, if you're trying to sell a software product to Liberty Mutual, and, you know, day one is the day when your product is least valuable because it's least trained. So you go up from there. How do you manage to be valuable immediately, even though, you know, your performance will improve dramatically over time? Customers don't have that kind of patience. So that's where I think domain expertise, both on the data, and, you know, I haven't gotten into the ML techniques and all that, but on the technical side, as well as the product and go-to-market side, become you know, critically important. And I think that's really what's unique about AI startups. Now, as they scale, they continue to improve. There's ongoing learning, albeit at some point probably the declining marginal return, but then they should absolutely every time of the day perform better than a non-data enabled, non-AI enabled product. But I think some of the considerations are important both on the talent, execution, and product side.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rudina, for that. So I think we just have another 2 more minutes before we wrap up this panel. But just closing question I have for the 3 of you. And very quickly, what's the one thing that excites you about the future of AI in Greater Boston? Rudina, 30 seconds for you. Go first.
What always excites me about technology and disruption is innovation, is the ability to imagine the future, or at least ride the imaginations of our amazing founders, and reinvent for the better and to do well as we go forward. So it's that ingenuity that comes with it. And I think Boston is a hotbed of innovation and ingenuity, even in the toughest of times.
Absolutely, it is. Julie, you want to just weigh in on that?
Sure. We're still in the early innings of AI and AI adoption. The opportunity to apply AI to fields and industries that we haven't skimmed the surface of is pretty immense. I think increasingly as the talent pool grows, new and unusual applications will continue to grow as well. And I'm really excited about that. A lot of what we see today, is across the board, things like marketing automation, sales automation, things in the realm of security, certainly, which is very, very exciting. And I think will actually get people used to and comfortable with AI-enabled technologies. And that's the first step.
Thank you. Thank you. And Deeksha, you have 30 seconds and then it'll be a wrap.
Yes, so I would say I'm excited about all the possibilities that AI opens, but I do want to end with a caution that on the good side, AI is so excited, but it could also be a biggest business risk that you could be having. So as we think about all the exciting things AI can unlock for us, I think we also need to put an eye for the caution to say, how do we make sure this is not taking us down the road in a negative direction?
Thank you, Deeksha. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. I expected that. I would get a lot of insights. I'm sure the participants feel the same. I'll pass this on to Celia to wrap it up finally.
Perfect.
Ahead,
Thank
Celia.
you. Yes, thank you, Roopa, for moderating. To Deeksha, Rudina, and Julie, you were fantastic. Thank you again to our sponsor, Liberty Mutual Insurance, and to all of you for joining us today, which I'm sure is tight given all the Zoom back-to-back meetings you all have. We appreciate it. And with that, I'll be signing off. Thank you on behalf of the Women's Network. Bye-bye.
Thank you.